Chapter 180, When Not Worth It. There were always some people who would give one a good impression straight away. This couldn't be explained. When Chen Ping'an saw the young scholar, his feeling of heavy-heartedness that had developed from walking down half a Fortune Street was instantly swept away. He carried the clay pot and briskly walked forward. The young scholar had a warm smile, and he didn't stand there and wait for Chen Ping'an. Instead, he walked over and said, "You're Chen Ping'an, correct? I'm Li Zisheng, Li Baoping's big brother. I've already received the most recent letter that Baoping sent from Mountain Cliff Academy. As her older brother, I truly don't know how to express my gratitude. I've heard that you're always reading now, so you're welcome to visit my house as much as you want in the future. I have a small collection of books, so please feel free to borrow them at any time." Not only did he extend this offer, but he even bowed in gratitude after accepting the clay pot from Chen Ping'an. Words cannot express my gratitude. Chen Ping'an was slightly flustered by this. In the end, he could only point at the clay pot and say with a demure expression, "Young Master Li, there's a mountain crossing carp in the clay pot. I found it in the mountains during my journey back to the town. It's a gift for Li Baoping." Li Zisheng glanced down at the golden fish that was leisurely swimming around in the small clay pot. When he looked back up at Chen Ping'an, he sighed with emotion and said, "I once read about mountain crossing carp in the notes of a past sage. These are incredibly rare creatures. Who would have thought that I would have an opportunity to see one in my lifetime? Rest assured, I'll definitely raise it carefully. Li Baoping will definitely be overjoyed when she returns home in the future." Chen Ping'an was at a complete loss. He didn't know how to reply to Li Zisheng's sincere and enthusiastic words. Even though he had dragged Qi Dongshan along to stare at that impressive school of mountain crossing carp at that time, so much so that his eyes had become sore, and it had taken him much effort to catch this specific mountain crossing carp, Chen Ping'an genuinely didn't view it as anything too precious. This was regardless of what the book said, and regardless of how mystical Qi Dongshan said these carp were. As long as it was for a genuine friend of his, Chen Ping'an was willing to do everything in his ability. However, Chen Ping'an was truly not good at small talk, so he scratched his head before saying goodbye. He was just about to turn around and leave. Li Zisheng hurriedly called out to stop Chen Ping'an from leaving. "Why don't you come in and stay for a while? I'll show you around first, and this way you'll be able to come by yourself in the future. I'll notify the steward afterward." "Maybe next time," Chen Ping'an replied with a shake of his head. "Then at least let me put the mountain crossing carp elsewhere first and return the clay pot to you, okay?" Li Zisheng said with a resigned smile. Chen Ping'an didn't turn his offer down this time, and he nodded and replied, "Then I'll wait for you here." "All right, I'll be just a moment," Li Zisheng said with a smile. He turned around and jogged inside with the clay pot in his hands. At this moment, the young man no longer appeared like a sagely person who expounded the teachings of Confucian classics. Instead, he genuinely appeared like Li Baoping's big brother. After a short while, Li Zisheng jogged back with the clay pot. There were also several books tucked under his arms. After Chen Ping'an accepted the clay pot, he bent down and placed it on the ground before vigorously scrubbing his hands clean. Only then did he accept the books. He also tucked them under his arms like Li Zisheng had, and he awkwardly picked the clay pot and said, "I'll return them once I finish reading them." There was a smile as gentle as the spring breeze on Li Zisheng's face as he waved his hand and said, "There's no hurry. Take your time and read them at your own pace. These books are far more well-behaved than Li Baoping, and they won't run around everywhere like her." Then he stopped joking around and continued slowly, "Chen Ping'an, my invitation for you to visit and borrow books isn't out of mere politeness. Instead, I genuinely hope that you can visit often. Even though Baoping is very smart, she's still a small child, after all. Getting a small child to sit down and quietly read is even more difficult than ascending to the heavens. In fact, it feels like I've been the only person browsing and reading these books all these years. Thinking about it carefully, this is actually quite mundane." Li Zisheng spoke many things from his heart in a single breath. If other members of the Li clan were present, they would definitely look west to see if the sun was rising one. This was because in comparison to his younger brother Li Baozhen, the lesser-known Li Zisheng appeared far too pedantic and uninteresting. Even though he was gentle and polite to everyone, he was generally a person of few words. This made him appear silent and boring. If he wasn't hiding in the scripture library and reading books, then he would be taking a walk in the large residence by himself. This was the same every day. He would watch the sunrise and sunset, the falling snow and bright moon, and everything else in between. Heavens knew what he could learn from observing these things. Fortunately, Li Zisheng was the eldest grandson of the Li clan, after all, so his relationship with the others in the clan wasn't bad at all. No one would dislike a good-tempered future clan leader. It was simply the case that he wasn't as likable as his younger brother Li Beijing. "I will visit," Chen Ping'an replied with a nod. Li Zisheng nodded in reply, before waving goodbye to the young boy. Looking at Chen Ping'an's gradually disappearing figure, Li Zisheng murmured, "Charming the green mountains appear in my eyes." A knowing smile spread across his face, and he continued, "Likewise, the green mountains also see me so, too." Li Zisheng turned around and walked toward the front gate of the Li clan's residence. There was a wide smile on his face as he strode over the door threshold, and he remarked to himself, "It's another beautiful day." However, upon recalling the news from the capital, he couldn't help but sigh. This couldn't be helped. Everyone had their burdens, and every family had their hardships. He continued to walk, and after passing a few corridors and buildings, a smile reappeared on his face. That won't hold up today's beauty. In the corridor, a young maidservant walked over from the opposite direction. She slowed down and turned to her side to perform a curtsy. "Young master," she greeted in a delicate voice. Li Zisheng habitually slowed down and acknowledged her with a smile and a nod. However, he didn't say anything, and he brushed past her just like that. The good-looking maidservant turned around to gaze at Li Zisheng. She involuntarily felt a sense of self-pity. Young master is indeed a fairly good person. However, it's a shame that he's oblivious to others' feelings, she sighed forlornly in her mind. If it were second young master, he would have definitely stopped to chat with her. Moreover, he would have also complimented her on the beautiful new headwear that she had bought. However, there was something that she naturally didn't know. Li Zisheng, the eldest grandson of the Li clan, was indeed oblivious to the feelings and environment in this place. However, he was deeply familiar with the feelings and environment in other places. For example, sudden rain striking withered lotuses, spring breeze blowing toward armored horses, beautiful women looking into bronze mirrors, generals wearing fine swords, and thick snow covering green mountains. In Li Zisheng's eyes, these were some of the most beautiful sights in the world. Li Zisheng returned to his courtyard. Here, there was a small pond that was built from piled-up pebbles of all kinds of colors. He squatted down beside the pond and looked down at the limpid water. Inside the pond, there was the mountain crossing carp that was swimming around in a leisurely and carefree manner. It was very difficult to imagine that this decent-looking pond was all the handiwork of Li Baoping. Each time she snuck out from home, she would very likely go to Dragon Whisker Creek to collect pebbles. Day after day and month after month, she would bring a few pebbles back every time. One day, when looking at the small mountain of pebbles lying in the corner of the courtyard, Li Baoping had suddenly come up with the brilliant idea to build a pond that could be used to raise fish and crabs for her big brother. Li Zisheng couldn't stop her, and in the end, he could only help her with ideas and suggestions. However, from the beginning to the end, Li Baoping had been the one doing all the manual work. As her big brother, Li Zisheng had naturally wanted to help. However, Li Baoping had stubbornly refused his help. Li Zisheng saw a small creature sneakily sticking its head out from under a bluestone slab and looking around. He smiled and said, "You two need to get along with each other. You're not allowed to fight." He then stood up and headed to the small scripture library that had a plaque with the characters, "Humble Abode," hanging above the door. He started to prepare paper, grind ink, and raise his calligraphy brush to draw. This was a painting of a snow-covered pine tree that gave off a strong ancient feel. After putting his calligraphy brush down, Li Zisheng shook his wrist and looked down to closely observe his painting. The ink was yet to dry, and its fragrance wafted toward his nose. In the end, he lightly blew onto the painting. As if facing a powerful gust of wind, the green pine tree in the painting surprisingly started to rustle. instantly shaking the snow from its branches. Zing. Ruan Xiu happily returned to the blacksmith shop. Failing to find her father forging iron using the sword furnace, she looked around for a while before finally seeing him sitting in a bamboo chair under the eaves. He was surprisingly drinking by himself. "Father, you're not forging iron?" she asked with a puzzled expression. The middle-aged man shook his head. "Forge my ass. Today isn't a good day for forging swords. However, if it's hammering Chen Ping on, I'll be more than happy to oblige." Ruan Xiu sat down next to him and said, "Father, I forgot to buy you wine today. When I go to the small town tomorrow, I'll definitely buy you a pot of good wine." She was adding insult to the injury. Of course, the young girl naturally didn't know that her words were essentially the same as rubbing salt into her father's wounds. Ruan Qiang sighed and took a large swig of wine. He blankly stared at the distant Dragon Whisker River, and he asked in a low voice, "Xiu Xiu, do you like Chen Ping'an?" "Of course I do," Ruan Xiu replied with a smile. Ruan Qiang surprisingly breathed a sigh of relief when he heard his daughter's answer. By the looks of it, there was still a chance to do something about this before it was too late. "Do you know why I didn't agree to take Chen Ping'an as a disciple?" the militarian sage asked. Ruan Xiu faltered for a moment before replying with a puzzled expression. "Father, didn't you already explain this before? You said that you had a fairly good impression of Chen Ping'an, but it was a shame that the two of you weren't like-minded people with a common goal. As such, he isn't suited to becoming your disciple. I already know about this. In addition, Chen Ping'an is a bit different from other people. So you're afraid that I'll attract the attention of many hidden forces acting in the background if I get too close to him. Because of this, you're actually quite unhappy with me becoming friends with Chen Ping'an. I completely understand this." Ruan Qiang was instantly rendered speechless. He felt like his daughter had taken the words right out of his mouth. Forcefully swallowing the words that had already reached the tip of his tongue, he tilted his head and gulped down another mouthful of wine. He was trying to drink wine to extinguish his gloom, but the more he drank, the gloomier he became. "Since you already understand these things, then you should hang out less with Chen Ping'an in the future. Silly daughter, you're not lacking in such a measly fated opportunity, and Chen Ping'an has also lost his ability to draw moths to the flames. Moreover, your body itself is your greatest fated opportunity. And what did you do? Once you heard that he was going to return, you immediately sprinted from Dragon Riding Alley all the way to the Stone Arch Bridge. You then pretended that you were casually taking a walk and leisurely heading toward your own shops. Just who in the world were you trying to trick?" Ruan Qiang put his wine aside and said in a calm voice, "Qi Jingchen's exit amounted to the wrapping up of the end game. However, even though Dragon Spring Prefecture no longer has any great dangers, it's still the case that many people are surrounding and coveting the juicy piece of meat that is Jewel's small world. Many things aren't as simple as you think. My opinion is still the same as before. If it's trouble that Chen Ping'an caused, he can easily deal with them by himself. Once you become involved in them, however, things will become far more difficult to resolve." Ruan Xiu stretched her legs and leaned back into the bamboo chair. With a lazy look in her eyes, she replied, I know, I promise that I'll cultivate earnestly. If anyone dares to do anything untoward in the future, I won't need your help either. I can deal with them by myself." Like falling snow, another handful of salt was rubbed into Ruan Qiang's wounds. The militarian sage almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He huffed angrily and stood up. When he walked past behind his daughter, he rewarded her with a smack on the back of her head. "You're always siding with outsiders." The corners of Ruan Xiu's mouth curled up into a smile as she turned around to look at her father's back. She didn't have much to do right now, as she didn't need to forge iron or look after the shops in the small town. She started to lightly twirl her wrist. Her bracelet seemingly came to life, and the small fiery dragon that was woken from its nap started to slowly circle around the young girl's soft and delicate arm. Zing. Ruan Qiang walked toward a newly constructed sword furnace. Apart from the many strong young men working in the blacksmith shop right now, he had also taken 3 new disciples this year. However, they were only unofficial disciples right now, and they couldn't be considered as in-house disciples. A young boy with long eyebrows who was comprehending sword intent by a well suddenly opened his eyes and jogged over to Ruan Qiang. "Master, you're going to the forge?" he asked softly. Ruan Qiang shook his head. He changed his mind, and rather than walking to the sword furnace, he walked toward the Dragon Whisker River instead. He wanted to personally measure the amount of darkness in the River 3 if there was enough. Then he could carry out his promise to Ning Yao and start to forge the sword. The young boy with long eyebrows followed closely behind him. Even though one was walking in front and one was walking behind, the two of them were still walking the same path. Chen Ping'an returned to his shop in Dragon Riding Alley and handed the small clay pot to the little boy in azure. He then handed the key and books to the little girl in pink. After doing this, he told them to return to his house in Clay Vase Alley first. Meanwhile, he went to the Yang family's medicine shop by himself. Regardless of whether it was windy, sunny, or raining, the couplets that were stuck on the two sides of the shop would be changed every single year. However, what was written on them would never change. May all sicknesses be eradicated. May all medicines be rendered unnecessary. Chen Ping'an asked a new shop attendant about Old Man Yang's whereabouts, and he was told that Old Man Yang was in the courtyard right now. After walking through the side door, Chen Ping'an saw the old man sitting on a small stool in the courtyard. His back was bent and his legs were crossed, and he was holding his smoking pipe and puffing away as always. Chen Ping'an didn't say anything, and he appeared slightly uneasy in a rare display. Old Man Yang got straight to the point and said, "You want to ask about your parents, and whether or not it's possible that they're in the same situation as Gu Ken's father. You want to know whether their souls remained in the small town after their deaths." Chen Ping'an's breathing instantly became heavy. No, they didn't. The old man exhaled a big cloud of smoke and directly explained the reason behind this answer. Because it wasn't worth it. The young boy lowered his head and became even quieter. Looking down, he could only see the blurry outline of his straw sandals, which were already severely worn. 1. This metaphor refers to something completely out of the ordinary. 2. An extract from Zinkiji's work, He Zinleng, to the tune of He Zinleng, How Truly Old I Have Become. Zinkiji was a Chinese poet, calligrapher, and military general during the Southern Song dynasty. Green mountains symbolize a noble character, so this quote refers to a person having the pure and noble determination to prefer loneliness over becoming complicit with immoral people. 3. Reminder that according to Old Man Yang, the river guardian Granny Ma can turn the water dark, which can give rise to water essence that's beneficial to forging and refining swords.